never said I oppose fracking. Show the tape. Put it on your website. Put it on the website.
Live from Clark Studios in Rochester, New York. Broadcasting around the world. You're listening to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
Freedom of speech will prevail, and that's exactly what happened this past week when our newest Supreme Court Justice and Savior, Amy Coney Barret, ruled in favor of the churches becoming free again. No more lockdown. King Cuomo was struck down in a 5-4 hearing. The Supreme Court justices ruled in favor of the churches. They are allowing people to pray. They are allowing people to freely congregate again. And literally, thank God. This is exactly the win that this country needed right now. And such a chaotic time of uncertainty, of nerve-wracking and very worrying situation that we constantly find ourselves in day after day with this coronavirus lockdown. I am very pleased with the situation, although sadly, a lot of our friends on the left are losing their minds over it. Apparently, they don't side with the Constitution, and it's a very worrying day when we see that half of the country would rather take the side of so-called experts over the Constitution of the United States. And we're going to break it all down, and we're going to digest this today. But first, let's head over, for those of you who don't know how this all started, let's hear what others have to say on why they think the entire religious church congregation lockdown was unnecessary, unconstitutional, and a complete violation of our freedom of speech. Let's head over and check it out.
Texas, Florida, South Dakota, they're refusing lockdowns. Mississippi is as well, per the governor we had on this show. Betsy McCoy, weigh in on that for me.
Well, the fact is, these are, in the words of Justice Samuel Alito, unimaginable intrusions into individual liberty. And when the pandemic started 9 months ago, these governors acted under state provisions that gave them very broad health authority. But nobody anticipated it would go this long. And the fact is, at this point, state lawmakers, state legislators should be stepping up and saying, wait a second, we're in a democracy. The governor cannot be a petty tyrant and impose these standards, these regulations by themselves. That's exactly what's happening. I'll give you an example. In New York State, Governor Andrew Cuomo is shutting down churches. A church with a capacity of 1,200, he says, can only allow 10 people. But the Target down the street, that's called an essential business, and people can crowd in there to shop. Think about it. Taking communion isn't essential, but shopping at Target is. That's how arbitrary these guidelines are. And fortunately, the diocese in Brooklyn and Queens in New York, the Catholic diocese, is taking Andrew Cuomo to the Supreme Court. And that's what should be happening all across this country. People should be defying these petty tyrants who are governors.
So she's absolutely right. We should be defying these petty governors as tyrants. And I'm glad that this is now happening. This aired a couple of weeks ago. And when I first saw this, I was thinking, thank God. I was so happy. I broadcasted this everywhere. And I thought, I'm so glad that these churches are now standing up for themselves, because we've had enough. And she's absolutely right. If Target can be open, if Walmart can be open and have literally hundreds of people walk in and out of those establishments on a daily basis, then churches who can seat 1,200 people should not be limited to only 10. And I've heard from so many people that, well, you can pray at home. You don't have to go to church. Prayer is not essential. First of all, that is not up to any of you. That is not up to anybody, because our Constitution says that freedom of speech will not take the back seat to a virus. And it's absolutely the right decision. And I'm so glad that we have the likes of Amy Coney Barret now sitting on the Supreme Court justice, a churchgoer, a religious believer who has said this is not acceptable. And cases were lost earlier in the year, if you remember. Before Amy Coney joined the team, cases were lost. Religious establishments were shut down. But since she's now come on board, she swung it more in a conservative favor, rightly so, and the Constitution is now finally prevailing. It's a beautiful thing to see, and I am so glad that we are now realizing the absurdity of it all. If Walmart can be open, if Target can be open, if these big box stores who seem to think they are better than everybody else can be open, small businesses can be open, and certainly churches can be open. Small businesses are next. You better believe they're on the agenda because people are fed up. It's a complete violation of the Constitution to be able to lock down like this, but there is no disputing whatsoever that freedom of speech has been violated here, and I'm so glad to see justice prevail in this case. Now, let's talk about this for a second. You've got all the left, a lot of the liberals here screaming, I can't believe we're choosing religion over lives. That's not what we're choosing here. This has nothing to do with science. It has to do with the Constitution. It's not up to people like you or I to interpret the Constitution based on our own agenda. That's not how this works. The Constitution was written to protect the people of the United States. All parties. It wasn't written to just protect Democrats. It wasn't written to just protect Republicans. It was written to protect all of us from a tyrannical government. And by us, I mean Democrats, Republicans, all Americans, full stop. We are all in this together, and we should all be on the same page here. And it's mind-blowing and baffling that we're not on the same page. It's an American Constitution. This is an American situation. As an American who doesn't believe that the Constitution should prevail, that is the most unpatriotic and most un-American thought process that can enter your head. Now, if you all, for those of you who do not agree with this ruling, okay, let's talk about this for a second. If this pandemic was that serious, if it was such a major threat, okay, a major threat here where we were scared to death of actually dying from catching it, we all wouldn't be out in the first place. Trust me, I wouldn't leave my studio. You'd get to hear from me 24/7 because I would do nothing but lock myself down. That is not the case here. That is why our government is allowing businesses like Walmart, Target, and everybody else to be open. And don't tell me it's because they're essential. Target does not have to be open. Walmart does not have to be open. And for those of you who don't know what happened in China, when this virus hit them, locked down 2 months, no in, no out. You are not leaving your house. You want groceries? We will bring groceries to you. That is essential. Yes, eating is essential. But don't tell me that you need to get in your car, go to Target because it's essential, but I can't go pray. I can't congregate at the church. That is not for you to decide if everything else is opened up. So China locked down for 2 months, and they actually took a decision that I do agree with. See, I'm not against the lockdown here. I'm against the way in which America is handling this lockdown. They are picking and choosing what stores are allowed to be open based on their own political and financial gain. Walmart, Target, all of these multi-billion-dollar corporations Our politicians owe them something, but they don't owe you, little small business, anything. So you're shut down. They don't care about your little tax revenue, but they certainly care about the likes of Walmart and Target. So is this really a situation of health, or is this a game of politics? Is the government really that scared for all of us? Apparently not, because they're allowing too many businesses to stay open. 90% of so-called essential businesses do not need to be open. Restaurants, bars, they don't need to be open. None of it needs to be open, to be honest. So I'm kind of getting tired here of everybody picking and choosing who they think's essential and then slamming everybody else who doesn't think they're essential. So we have the case now. Let's take a look at CNN and see what they have to say over at the Keyboard Warrior Cam about the new ruling.
About some of that impact right now. Thank you very much, Polo. So joining us is CNN legal analyst Ellie Honig. He's a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. So Ellie, how do you see the significance of this decision?
Well, this is a really big deal, Allison, because it's the first time a court, certainly the Supreme Court, has come in and struck down regulations imposed aiming to limit the spread of COVID by local authorities. Essentially, what the Supreme Court says here is this is an unconstitutional infringement on the First Amendment right to free exercise. They say you cannot treat churches and synagogues different from other comparable organizations. But one of the big headlines here is the changing composition of the court has immediately yielded very different results. Just a few months ago, back in July, the Supreme Court had a very similar case that originated out of California and Nevada and ruled 5-4 upholding the restrictions. Now, the big difference, of course, is Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed and been replaced by Amy Coney Barrett. She has flipped, and with her has gone the entire decision of the court. Now they come out 5-4 the other way and at least temporarily say Governor Cuomo's executive order that limits the capacity of these religious organizations, that gets struck down. So that's a big difference.
So as you can see here, he made it very clear that churches and synagogues cannot be treated differently. It is a complete and utter disrespect of the Constitution. It's a complete violation of our freedom of speech. So it's great to see that we have many of the media agencies reporting positive on this. Now, here's where I got furious with CNBC, and I posted this on my personal feed last night. I was furious and outraged. I've never been more outraged over the COVID situation than I was last night when I scrolled across this post on CNN. Let's take a look. CNN reports the Supreme Court's ruling against New York State's decision to limit religious gatherings in a few high incidence parts of New York City during the coronavirus pandemic will cause grave danger in the rest of the United States. Grave danger. Here we go again. CNN causing panic and fear. This was so unnecessary for them to point out. They are slamming the Constitution in this post. It's a complete and utter disrespect of CNN to state something like this. You don't slam the very country that you're supposed to be backing as a news agency. This is a complete bias article. So they're here in this article slamming the ruling here, or indirectly slamming the ruling. I know what they're trying to do here. They're trying to cause continued fear, panic, because it suits their agenda. What CNN's obsession and the liberal media's obsession with keeping us scared, what their obsession with that is beyond me. Let's take a look at the comments and see what people had to say. I got murdered last night for voicing my opinion, as you can imagine. And it's a very dangerous thing as a Republican conservative to go treading into a very liberal-based media agency like CNN. But I, unlike many of the left, appreciate the perspective. I appreciate listening to both sides of the story. I appreciate the debate. I appreciate the argument. It's healthy for us to learn. Hence the reason I go into Facebook posts and voice my opinion because I welcome that feedback. So here's what I wrote last night. Do you all now see why we are sick of CNN? They are the most corrupt news agency in mainstream media. They are literally telling you to abandon the Constitution over a virus. What is wrong with you people? This is absolutely the right decision. As you can see, I got a barrage of replies, a barrage of feedback, or hundreds of feedback on telling me why I was an absolute monster for choosing the Constitution over science. Listen, it's sad. I know. I don't want anybody to die any more than you. But as the justices just ruled and made very clearly, you cannot, state governors, you cannot violate the Constitution and our rights over science in this case. So let's scroll down and see what other people have to say. So obviously a lot of people didn't like what I had to say. I got murdered. Let's take a look at this. Kay says, what happened to listening to the scientists? We've already lost an unbelievable amount of people. We already have a president, soon to be former president, who made wearing a mask a political issue. We need to listen to the science so we can get through this. Shaking my head, I pray for you, the U.S. Okay, again, science has nothing to do with this. Religion actually doesn't have much to do with this either. Again, the argument here is our freedom of speech was compromised. Therefore, the Supreme Court justices defended that freedom. The science in this case is irrelevant. It is absolutely irrelevant. That's my debate. That's my argument. You can come at me with how many people died, the growing cases, the growing death, which is all very sad. I'm very empathetic and compassionate towards that. I am not an anti-masker. I will wear my mask out there out of respect for other people. But where I draw the line is these draconian lockdowns, and I'm glad that we are slamming the state governors for it. Let's take a look here. Hope the justices will be willing to help in hospitals on critical care COVID floors when numbers of infected people rise. Follow the science. You want to follow the science? Here's the science. The science says that there is a 99.8% survival rate. Cuomo keeps saying, follow the science. Yet he doesn't, and they have now already confirmed this. They refuse to shut down private schools. They've shut down public schools, but they don't shut private schools. Well, what science exactly are we following when we're so contradictory in what we decide to shut down and what we don't decide to shut down? So the whole follow the science thing is mind-blowing to me, especially when we have such a high survival rate. Let's see here. Again, science plays no part in this. Let's see what people have to say here. I'm always curious to see what the rebuttals are. Where's the science? Manuel says, where's the science? Have you heard of anyone coming out of church service infected? I bet not. Okay, here's another thing I'd like to pose to all of you who want to keep following the science. We are months away from a vaccination. First of all, according to polls, 1 out of 3 people in America will not be getting the vaccine. Parents are sick to death of being held hostage or their children being held hostage with a vaccine. They are going to put their foot down. They're not getting the vaccine. So if 1 out of 3 Americans are not going to get the vaccine, if 1 out of 3 Americans aren't going to get that vaccine, then what do you think is going to happen as we get into April, May, June, when most of the country says, no thanks, you can get the vaccine, I'm not getting the vaccine. We'll see what happens. It's also very interesting to note that the efficiency rate of the flu vaccine, that has been a big argument here. The flu vaccine that's been out for decades now, yet 66,000 people on average a year die. So what are we going to do? when people continue to die from the vaccine? Are we going to keep screaming lockdown for the rest of our lives? Are we going to honestly wear a mask for the rest of our lives? We're going on 8 months here, people. At some point, we have to say, you know what? If you're scared, stay in. Why don't we all compromise here? Okay, you stay in. I will go to work. I'll provide for this economy. I'll go raise tax money so people like you can continue to collect unemployment. How's that for a fair compromise? You stay home, you lock yourself down for the rest of your life for all anybody cares. I'll go to work, I'll provide, I'll bring home a paycheck so our government can continue to get their tax money. Because I'll tell you right now, our states are going broke. Our country isn't going to be able to afford Social Security soon if we do not get back to work. What's worse, fear of a virus with a 99.8% survival rate, or the fact that half of you watching this show right now aren't even going to be able to put food on your table if we don't get back to work right now? That's so forget science for a minute. Money doesn't grow on trees. Where are you going to get your paycheck if we all continue to hunker down? So I've argued this case before. If you are so scared, stay in. I'd rather the next relief package go to somebody like you or those who are actually scared and who are sick, rightly so. My mom, who's 80 years old, who can't go out, I have family who are immune compromised. They should not go out. They need to stay home. Give that relief package to people like them. I don't need a relief package. That's called a socialist handout. I don't need it from my government. I'll go out and I'll work my butt off myself. But at some point, we need to stop over dramatizing and over politicizing this situation and start taking care of our economy again. Let's go back to the keyboard warrior Cam and see who else has things to say here. Heard of people who have been to services being affected, says Lois. Probably hard to prove whether they got it there or took it there. It looks like the deaths of the several preachers who claimed God would protect them doesn't resonate with you. Again, this has nothing to do with us congregating. This has to do with protecting freedom of speech, and it will prevail. And I'm adamant on this, and I am so glad that we have been able to put our foot down and rule in favor. He says it was a very just and constitutional decision. Simple solution. If you're concerned about the virus or you're high risk, then don't participate. Stay home and remain locked down. No one is telling you that you can't. The problem is when those of you that want to be locked down and told what to do, your ideology should be applied to everyone. You do not get to micromanage people's lives. No matter how scared you are or how deadly a virus is, you don't have to like it, which is why you are just as free to stay home if you like. You never sacrifice freedom of security. In the end, you get neither. I love this comment, Keith. You are so on point. I love the fact that he highlighted here that it's your right to stay home. How could it be? How am I supposed to sit here and just accept and take it that I can't earn and that I have to stay home? How is it okay to take away that right, but at the same breath you're happy to tell me what to do, but I can't tell you what to do? That makes no sense at all. And that is why there is such a divide. You have the right to stay home. I have the right to work. Let's all get back to the Constitution here. Let's all remember what this country's about. Let's take care of each other while doing it, but let's not tread on the rights that were given to us. It's very simple, and I'd like to see justice prevail every single time here. So, as we see now, governors all over the country, governors are now in threat of being impeached. Democratic governors who have overstepped their boundaries with their draconian measures are now facing impeachment. Michigan County Board supports impeachment. So we've got a governor in Michigan who's not only being threatened to be impeached, but the county board is now supporting it. Petitions in place for New York State governor, who is probably the next one to go because his unruly and unjust and completely ridiculous do as I say, not as I do laws are infuriating too many New Yorkers right now. And everybody keeps saying, well, New York City keeps backing Cuomo. It's never going to happen. New York City is so broke right now that people are exiting by the hundreds of thousands. There's not going to be much left of New York City for anyone to be able to even vote there in the first place. You're going to have red rule states now engulf New York State. If he doesn't get impeached, there's no way he's getting voted back in 2022. So we've got governors now being impeached. Ohio Republicans have drafted articles of impeachment against the governor, Mike DeWine, of overabuse. He's a Republican, by the way. The GOP has had enough. They don't care who you are. We don't care if you're a Democratic governor. We don't care if you're a Republican governor. If you keep this up, we are coming after you one by one. What's also interesting to note is that governors throughout this entire time, I have heard time and time again, this is President Trump's fault. Hold on a second. President Trump locked this country down back in February, if you remember. Back at the end of February, he locked this country down against incoming travel from China before Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, or any of the Democrats decided to take a stance. He locked it down. He said no one in from China. But the uproar from the immigration catalysts, you can't do that. You can't lock down people. That's unconstitutional. They need to be let into our country. Immigration. They kept screaming and arguing. Fine, he lifted it. State governors cried, you don't have any control over our state. We're going to do what we want to do, and you have no say over it. You want to come and tell me what to do? No. These are my rules, my state, my decisions. Well, they got a little bit ahead of themselves, these state governors, and now, rightfully so, they're seeing justice prevail. And one by one, we're going to see these state governors get hit hard. And don't think Biden's going to bail them out either, because Biden has already come online if he becomes president of the United States, a big if. Biden's already come on and said, we are not locking down. This nation will not lock down. Probably the only sensible thing that's ever come out of that guy's mouth is that we're not locking down. So I applaud Joe Biden for locking down. Now, here's another interesting fact if you don't know about this. Governor Cuomo, who wanted to play the whole, I'm going to be the leader of the country here and lock our state down, and hopefully everybody will follow, and I'll win Emmys, and I'll kill thousands of elderly people, but who cares? Because, hey, I get to call the shots in my own state, and Biden will bail me out anyway. That was his big plan, to be bailed out by Biden. He now wants his bailout money, but guess what? Biden said, nope, sorry. I owe a lot of money to the battleground states for picking me for president. So that's where my money's going to go to. And I'm going to cover in my next episode exactly where all that money's going to go and why New York State isn't going to see a dime of it anytime soon. So Cuomo is up shit's creek right now because he has locked the state down. He's thrown thousands of elderly into nursing homes who have died, by the way. What other state has done that? What other state has actually killed so many people as Governor Cuomo has? 33,000 people have died in New York State. 0.17% of the New York State population has died from coronavirus. We have had the strictest lockdown measures out of any state. Florida, 17,000 people. Less than half have died in Florida. 0 lockdowns whatsoever. Lockdowns don't work. The justices have prevailed. They preserved our Constitution. I am so happy about this decision, no matter how many crying liberals there are out there. This has nothing to do with science. This has nothing to do with congregating in public. This has to do with freedom of speech. This has to do with defending our Constitution, and we're going to see a lot more of it over the next few weeks. now that this has gone down, it's only going to get more in favor of the American people. The Constitution will and should prevail 100% of the time. Thank you guys so much for joining me today on this wonderful Saturday morning. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. If you want to be on the show, email guest@youmadeitpolitical.com. That's guest@youmadeitpolitical.com. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the weekend, and we will see you soon.
Thanks for listening to You Made It Political with Matt Clark. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show, or leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like our show or want to know more, check out youmadeitpolitical.com.